When someone tells me do your research, I inevitably think of this document here, which is an annotated bibliography for a project that I started a few years ago. I'm just going to start it scrolling, and you can see how large of a document this is while I talk to you. There's a line in the Teresa of Avila section that I read yesterday. God help me in this mess I've gotten myself into. I've forgotten what I was writing about last. Business and health matters forced me to set the work aside just when we were getting to the best part so far. Since I have such a poor memory, it will probably all be very confusing from here on, because I simply cannot bear to go back and read it over again. This is what I'm worried about anyway. So yeah, this is what I don't want to read over again. This is... yeah, also something that I couldn't continue due to health problems and other such issues. And yeah, so what is this? This is a research project looking at childhood trauma as a confounder in the epidemiology of marijuana use. Specifically, the issue is that there are a number of outcomes that are associated with only early onset cannabis dependence, and not with cannabis use in general, early use in general, dependence in general, but early onset dependence specifically, it happens to be associated with a set of outcomes that are also associated with childhood trauma. And as it turns out, childhood trauma is a very strong predictor of early onset cannabis dependence. But yet the studies that are saying that marijuana causes X, Y, and Z aren't actually looking at trauma as a possible confounder. So I thought, well, okay, that's important. I should do some research on that. I should try to make them more available, help people to understand this. And yeah, it kind of ballooned because I didn't set the scope in a narrow enough way. So I'm looking at, cognitive, I'm looking at immunology, I'm looking at endocrinology, I'm looking at epidemiology, sociology, etc. And there's just a lot of it on a lot of different subjects here. Let's pause this scroll, see how far we've gotten. We're at ETO, so we're in the eyes. Increased prevalence of electrophysiological abnormalities in children with psychological, physical, and sexual abuse. So yeah, okay, really cheery stuff that I really want to spend all day, every day for months and months reading without any pay whatsoever. Maybe? Okay, here's another one. Kaniyama, spatial working memory in heavy cannabis users, a functional magnetic resonance MRI study. Yeah, some of this is really dry, most of it's really dry, some of it is really infuriating actually, some of it's super interesting, but trying to synthesize all of this on all these different subjects is just like a bit much. And, as it happens, I like to have opinions about other things. I, as much of a generalist as I am just in this, talking about, 12 or so different academic fields, none of which I'm actually an expert in, but I do my best. I also want to talk about politics, and I want to talk about what's going on in the world. I want to talk about art and literature and keep things balanced, because I can't just do this stuff all day. It's going to drive me crazy, I was going to say, but I don't know if that's... Anyway, yeah, I mean, it burnt me out once. I don't really want to go back and read all of this, but kind of should. If I do read it all, then I get to, sort it, comment on it, and make something for you. Make, gifts for you on YouTube. Maybe I can actually eventually get to a point where I can actually submit for publication. That would be nice. People have been telling me to submit for publication for years. I made a third draft that it's not terrible. Cites 567 sources, then I was reviewing a few hundred other sources, and burnt out during that, never got it finished. And in order to get it to a state that I would consider adequate, I think it's going to require hundreds more hours worth of work, which is, unless you want to pay me, is not paid and is pretty exhausting. And yeah, it's a whole issue. So where are we scrolling here? NMDA receptors, risk and vulnerability for marijuana use problems, role of affect dysregulation, so again, relationship to trauma there, relationship of stress, and coping methods to adolescent marijuana use. It's interesting how often these papers seem to pair up that are actually relevant to each other, even though this bibliography is purely alphabetical according to the lead author's last name. But yeah, so I don't know, would you want to read this? Do you want to read this? I can make this available to you. I can also try to make it available in more usable formats, and I might do some work putting it in different formats or putting parts of it in different formats so that it's actually useful to people, in that this giant document is really, a bit of a mountain to be crushed under. Yeah, don't try to read this. I don't want to try to read this, but you're going to make me, or I'm going to make me. We'll see. Weber. Stress load during childhood affects psychopathology in psychiatric patients. Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of the stuff is obvious, but then some of it is not as obvious. Talking about the physiology of how trauma and cannabis actually affect the stress response systems within the body. A lot of people aren't really all that educated about that stuff, and it affects them. It affects everybody. Let's say, not only trauma survivors and cannabis users, but how about anybody who's ever stressed out for any reason? And I'm not the only one in my generation, let's say, who has suffered from issues with burnout. I think that's true of quite a lot of us, actually, that we're expected to do way too much work, that we kind of just, like, work our knuckles white until we're not able to continue, and then we have to spend years recuperating, which I've done, and I'm feeling a little bit better now, and maybe I can actually work on this, but I don't want to just destroy myself again, so I want to take this step by step. Okay, so that's the whole document there, from Atchison to Zwardi. Cannabidiol, cannabis sativa constituent is an antipsychotic drug, or scroll up a bit, what's the next one here? Zopi, regulatory role of cannabinoid receptor 1 in stress-induced excitotoxicity and neuroinflammation. So let's look at the bottom left here. You can see the sub-bibliographies. So what I'm doing here is that I'm taking this whole annotated bibliography and breaking it apart into 12 plus 1, 13 balloons for 13 moons, I call it. So this is the bibliography just on psychosis. So you can see I'm up to the S's in terms of that sorting function. Marijuana and physiology, there's like quite a few here, again up to the S's. And yeah, this way I don't need to go through the entire annotated bibliography when I'm working on any given one of these buckets. I can just, take the papers that are relevant that I've already sorted into that. You can see there's, copy-paste the whole excerpts into the individual bibliographies, etc., yada yada. Okay, here's some more papers that I still need to review. There's one folder of it, and there's a second folder of it. So there's a lot more here, and I don't know if you've ever researched anything before. I don't know to what extent that you've read things that have bibliographies, especially things in contentious areas of science that are currently being updated, but often proves to be a bit of a hydra. If you don't know what a hydra is, Hercules had to fight a monster. Every time that he cut off one of its heads, it would sprout multiple heads in place of the one. So, the more papers that you review, the more entries in their bibliography that are relevant that you then want to, review those papers. Then those papers also have bibliographies, so the whole thing kind of balloons. And yeah, these are just ones that I've got saved. Some of these are recent 2018, 2019 papers, but I'll probably still want to, search and find a few other papers that aren't even in all this. Oh, and there's also, back to the other window here, there's also these PDFs that I've downloaded that I still need to review and sort. So it's a bit much of a muchness, as my mum would say. And yeah, I don't know. Tell me what to do. Tell me how I can make this actually useful or interesting to you. Give me money to make it so that I can actually continue with the project, or if you want to be involved and help me review some of the stuff or do your own take on it, I'm happy to share. Yeah, I'm not trying to hoard any of this or try to set myself up as, oh, I'm such a great expert, I know all the things. Well, no, it's like publicly available information or pirated information. Thank you, Alexandria Elbakian, for Sci-Hub that allows me to circumvent paywalls, and that you should use too, because fuck the journals. But my conclusions are going to be, for the most part, based on what I can actually access, what's in these PDFs, some of which contradict each other, and some of which, all of which don't have the full picture. But that's what research is, and it takes a long time, and it's pretty difficult. And at the end of the day, people are still not going to be convinced if they, if they happen to be biased against your position, or if something about your delivery didn't really work for them, whatever it is. But I do want to make things so that they're a little bit more useful for people, so that people can understand themselves better, so that people can stop mistreating other people who are just trying to take care of themselves. And yeah, I don't know. I'll leave that here for now. I'm not used to doing these candid videos, but I do want to get better at presenting this information. And I thought I should show you just how much there is and what that actually means. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.